Womack. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm originally from Houston, Texas. And this piece that I have here is my first outdoor sculpture piece. It's called Shooting Electrons, and it refers to what happens in a cathode ray tube inside a television or a monitor to produce a horizontal bit mapping of light to create an image. And so with this piece, I built a cube armature, the skeleton of a cube, and wrapped it with lights that from one vantage point, in this case the entrance to the property, all the lighting lines up horizontally across the piece, and the lights alternate from red, green, and blue colored streaks so that it picks up across the different parts of the piece. And previously my work has been installation based, site sensitive, lighting sensitive types of work where I was building images with reflected light, using mirrors, using larger armatures and apertures to cast and see light to create an image. It comes out of painting, and so usually color is always involved. My history is in painting, and I guess I'm chiefly interested in technology and how we build and create images, and then culturally how those things influence other people. So from this perspective, you can see how probably most of the lighting, even across different angles and on different axes, is mostly horizontal in nature, and that's because now we're looking at it from the entry point. And one of the challenges with this piece was to get the horizontal lines from one piece to match up visually over here from this piece and across the entire piece of sculpture. And in my studio that was really challenging because I had wanted to deal with distances of several hundred yards. Ordinarily, to do that, someone would probably use a projector. I didn't have one, so I just used a laser pointer and gridded out lines across with a tripod, sweeping across it, and therein found where I was going to be putting all the lighting. It's probably about 700 feet of light-emitting diode rope, LED rope. And so it's really meant to be pictorial in that I like when you walk around it and it changes, but hopefully it addresses you and tells you how to look at it with regards to this orientation that we're looking at it right now. But then I like the changing and the morphing of that as well.
My name is Sharon Engelstein. I live in Houston, Texas, and this is my piece, Green Golly, over there. And it is an inflated vinyl piece, has an ongoing fan that inflates it, and it's pretty typical of some recent work that I design and model in a 3D modeling program, and then collaborate with a blimp company to take my patterns and turn it into a inflatable, what we call a cold air inflatable. Site-specific piece. It was designed to fit into this context in between these columns at Evergreen Museum, and it's pretty typical of my aesthetic sensibilities, biomorphic abstraction. People have been asking me which one is mine, and I'm referring to it as the green blob on the front porch. Looks like a breast curve. I've been told that about my work many times. Influenced by some other artists who have worked in that way, Henry Moore, Barbara Hepworth, Constantine Brancusi, to more contemporary artists. So that's where I'm using that word biomorphic abstraction from, and that's my inspiration.
I'm Jay Hill. I'm one of the artists here at Evergreen, obviously. So they, the pieces behind me are two teepees. Most of my work is relational in some respect. In other words, the environment of the context is in some effect one of the media that I work with, and one of the things that I was really interested about when I came here, and actually even when I applied for the exhibition, was the history of not just the house itself, but the people that built the house, and the library and the things that they had collected. I came to discover they had about 40,000 photographs that they had commissioned, being done by Edward Curtis, which was a turn-of-the-century photographer of Native Americans primarily. So I started poking into that, and so on and so forth. And long story short, found numerous different kinds of connections that the Garrett family had to not just Native Americans, but a particular group of Sioux Indians, and who are now, originally were in Minnesota, North and South Dakota, so on and so forth. They're confined to a relatively small area in South Dakota now. So that was sort of the jumping off point. Visually speaking, I also just sort of like the contrast between something that's simple and straightforward, and is really based on necessity. You know, sitting in front of something that is in many ways the antithesis of that, and not just visually but also culturally. I mean, this really represents nomadic American West. I went and talked with the people on this reservation, Pine Ridge Reservation, and worked with them to make sure that these were made the right way. I didn't want it to just be this sort of one-liner kind of sitting out here that didn't have any authenticity to it at all. So they, from the ground up, showed me how they were built, how they, why they would be structured the way they would, how they would be oriented, how to start with 3 poles as opposed to a Creek Indian who would start with 4 poles and then build the structure in a different way, and so on and so forth.
My name's Adam Frelin. This is my piece, Lighthouse Beheaded. It's a small lighthouse in which the top has been lopped off, and yet the lighting element in the base of it still continues to run, like a head that's been chopped off, but still speaks, still sees, thinks. It's actually a prop for a film that I'm going to be shooting soon. The top portion, as I mentioned, has a lighting element in it that continually rotates. So it looks a lot better at night because the light actually, as it rotates, is really strong enough, believe it or not, to rake all the way through the forest. And so you see this really strong beam all the way from the house.
My name's Andrea Poland, and I'm the guest curator for this exhibition at Evergreen Museum. And the Evergreen Museum asked me to come and select submissions from artists from around the country. So I picked artists whose works I really was fascinated by in terms of their ways of incursions into nature. Which isn't to say there weren't a lot of incredible other proposals out there, but ultimately it had to be narrowed down to 10, and also artists that I thought could engage not only the landscape, but also possibly the house, the history of the house, the collections. A few artists have addressed the collections in these pieces, and then just the landscape itself, or the history of Baltimore.